The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. This is Comfortably Zoned Radio, and it's time for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. My name is Peter Trunk, and with me tonight is Fred Wallin and Ron Rabinovitz. Fred, how you doing?
Very hot here in Southern California, and I know we're going to talk some hot baseball over the next few minutes right here on the podcast.
Here we go. Ronnie, what's going on?
Not much. It was warm here, too. It was about 87 today. Beautiful, not a cloud in the sky. And it's been nice weather. We never had spring, by the way. It went right from winter to summer.
Yeah, that happens.
I
don't like that myself, but that does happen.
Yeah, it did happen. Yeah. So,
well, we got a lot to talk about.
We sure do.
With the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I want to start off talk about my beloved Brooklyn Dodgers from what I like to call the People's Republic of Stickball, and that is the borough of Churches itself, Brooklyn, New York. The departure of the Dodgers, I was 11, by the way, but it ripped out Brooklyn fans' hearts. It really did. A Brooklyn fan from that era lived for baseball. I mean, literally lived for baseball. Going to school, going to work was something that had to be done. But more importantly, it filled a time before the Dodger game. And you had to be there. Even if you might agree that the nostalgic recollections of Ebbets Field and the Dodgers that played there are occasionally overdone. I agree with that also, but you just had to be there. It was crazy. I mean, you walk down the street and total strangers. You'd be in the butcher shop or the candy store or wherever, and bus stop, and you just turn to the guy you never saw him in your life, and you start off by saying, "Can you believe what Ferrillo did last night?" And the guy just started talking to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely amazing. You didn't go up and say, "Hello, my name is Peter. I live at 122." Whatever. No, you just all of a sudden you turn to the guy and you go, "Man, can you believe it? I mean, that's Snyder. He's a bum." And you'd be off and running. You'd be talking. Is Hodges ever going to get a hit again? You know, and you just go into this deep and long discussion, and you were friends before you never even introduced yourself. When the conversation was over and you went your separate ways, you didn't know who the hell the guy was. Probably never see him again in your life. But I mean, that's the way it was in Brooklyn. That's how close it was for the Dodgers and their fans in Brooklyn. It was almost obscenely intimate. The players lived in the borough. You'd see them shopping. You'd see their wives. You'd see them getting their hair cut. You'd see them at the gas station, church, wherever you'd run into them. It was an amazing time. And like I said, I was 11 when they left. And when the announcement was made, you know, I kept asking my father over and over, are the Dodgers really going to be leaving? And he said, of course not. This is all political maneuvering and, you know, who's going to get what. And it's all a money grab and all that stuff. So and my uncles said much the same thing. There was no one in my family that said, you want to know something? They're actually going to go. And I didn't believe it until the next season when I actually saw on television and in the newspapers the interlocking L.A. on their caps. And then and only then did it hit home. And, of course, the games weren't at Ebbets Field. They weren't on the radio. They weren't on the TV. They were really gone. And what personally stabbed me in the heart a second time was that they were horrible. They were terrible. Their first
57.
year out there.
Yeah.
They lost all the time. 58.
Yeah.
58,
right. That's right.
57 was their final year here.
Yeah, that's right.
They just have, every time you would look, you couldn't get the score, first of all. All the other scores would be in the newspaper. And whoever was playing the Dodgers, it would say so-and-so, like St. Louis at L.A., and then there'd be an N, the letter N in parentheses, night. You were always a day behind of what they did, and then when you finally did get the score of what they did the night before, they lost 6-2, or they lost 8-1, or they lost 5-0, or they lost 4-3. They lost and lost and lost, finished seventh, horrible. But then, of course, in '58 they won everything. In '59 they won everything.
'59, yeah.
And the thing that killed me was not only did they win everything in '59, but their first 6-7 years out there, they won the World Championship a number of times. They won in '59. They won again in '63. They won again in '65. It was absolutely crazy. It really was. But I'm just going to take a back seat now. Fred, what were you a Dodger fan back then, or did you you were too young, or you waited till they moved to L.A., or what? How did that work out for you?
Well, I was a couple years younger than you guys, but my dad was a Chicago Cubs fan, and then when the Dodgers signed Robinson, like thousands of others, he wasn't very political, but he didn't like racism, so he became a Dodger fan. And I told you this story, I think, last time I did this, but it's a true story. He puts me in front of the TV set. I'm 5 years of age, and he says, that's the best player in baseball, and it was Duke Snider. And the next pitch, I swear to you, hits a home run. As we do this show, as I do every show from our home radio studio, there's a picture of Duke staring me in the face. Of course, he's been gone now 7 years as of this past February. But, and later in my career, of course, I met him a few times, interviewed him a few times, and it was a kick. No, I was a big Dodger fan, and my dad took me to Roy Camp Lanella night, 93,103, and your point well taken. In 58, they were horrible, and in 59, Vin Scully said, and we're going to Chicago, meaning they beat the Braves and they're facing the White Sox, and as you indicated, they win in 63 and 65 and almost win in 66. And honestly, guys, I think if you look back, I have been one of the luckiest sports fans ever, because I'll tell you why. I was a Duke Snider and Dodger fan before they moved here, okay? I saw Elgin Baylor play basketball at the age of 5, 57, against Kentucky in the national championship game, and he became my favorite basketball player. The next year, guess who drafted him? Minneapolis Lakers. The next year, guess where they were? Los Angeles. So I would be willing to bet you that very few sports fans have had the fortune of their two biggest heroes, Elgin Baylor and Duke Snider, actually moving to their town. I think this is, looking back at my sports life.
That's great.
Very lucky.
It's terrific.
That's a great story, Fred. That's a great story.
That's a great story.
Snider, you love him, and he comes 3,000 miles to you, and then you love Elgin Baylor, and he comes over from the lake of Minneapolis and comes into L.A. That's great. That's a great story.
That's great.
Cool. I guess you thought at that tender age that you had some sort of power, that if you liked somebody, they would just move to L.A. I would have. I would have thought that.
I had much more power then than I have now.
I was 12 years old when the Dodgers moved out of Brooklyn.
Okay. Are you still there, Ronnie? I think we lost Ronnie.
Well, he was 12 years old when they moved out of Brooklyn, and some Brooklyn Dodger fan got very upset with his comment, I guess. I don't know.
I guess so. Cut him off. He probably just lost his bars. Sometimes Ronnie calls on his cell phone. I keep telling him to call in on his house phone, but sometimes he calls in on his cell phone and he loses his signal. He'll probably be calling back. But Ronnie Rabinovitz was very, very lucky in that his father introduced him to Jackie Robinson in Milwaukee. Brought him to a game against the Braves, and when the game was over, they went in to the Dodger clubhouse.
I'm back.
Ronnie, you're back. All right.
I lost
you
all of a sudden.
You were 12 years old when they left. What were you going to add to that?
I was going to add that I had an uncle that lived in Beverly Hills, and he was good friends with Danny Goodman. Danny Goodman was a promotional guy for the Dodgers. And that first year, he sent me a Dodgers jacket and an LA hat. So for me, it was a pretty easy move between the two. And meeting Danny Goodman one time and knowing this, and then from time to time, my uncle would send me other Dodgers things, so it was pretty exciting.
That's nice. Tell us how your father, how did your father know Jackie Robinson?
He didn't know.
I know the story. I know the story how you met him. I never really heard the story how your father met him.
He didn't really know Jackie at that time. He loved the Dodgers because the Dodgers brought Jackie into baseball, brought him in integrating the league in 1947. So he became a Dodger fan right then and there. My dad was way ahead of his time. He was very much of an activist. He was very much he was for civil rights, and he had so much respect for the Dodgers bringing him in. So he used to tell me stories about Jackie. And one day he said to me, "How would you like to meet him someday?" And I said, "Boy, would I love that." Well, unbeknownst to me, he wrote Jackie a letter and told him how much I admired him. And Jackie wrote back with an autographed picture. And he said next time that the club's in Milwaukee playing the Braves, he'd love to meet me. And we got to Dodger Stadium, or to Milwaukee County Stadium, and we went down to the locker room after the game. When he came out, I ran up to him with about 50 other kids, and I said, "Jackie, I'm Ronnie Rabinovich. Do you remember me?" And he says, "Sure I do." And my dad's standing over my shoulder. He says, "Sure, Jackie, with the 1,000 little letters you get, how would you remember it?" He says, "No, I remember your dad wrote me on lawyer stationery. My father was an attorney."
Right.
And that's how it all started. And then Jackie said to me, "Stay in touch." So when I got home in Sheboygan that night, I wrote him a letter, told him how much I enjoyed meeting him, sent Jackie Robinson, Stamford, Connecticut, no address, no zip code. He got it. And he'd write back, "Ronnie Rabinovich, Sheboygan, Wisconsin. No address, no zip code, I'd get it." So that's how it all started. And my dad was he was a big Democrat, my dad. He was actually, for many years, he was the treasurer of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And later on, he became the national committeeman from Wisconsin. So he and Jackie was a Republican, but he was not a Republican like we know Republicans today. He was a Rockefeller Republican who probably today would have been thrown out of the party.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just like Abraham Lincoln would have been a Democrat, no question about it.
Sure.
But, so they used to argue back and forth about politics. And Jackie was upset with the Democrats, and understandably so, because all the leadership of the Democratic Party at the time in Congress were Southerners. And they were all Dixiecrats. They were bigots.
Yeah.
You know. And so he didn't like what they were doing, so he kind of was a Republican. But after a while, he got frustrated with Eisenhower, and he wrote me a letter. And in these letters, these sweet letters, and he says, "Tell your dad Ike made me a Democrat or something." And then he'll say, I don't know how I brought that up. I guess just my way of saying hi to your dad. And then I think it was in 57 or 58, the Democrats voted against the civil rights type of legislation. And he went back to the Republicans. And of course, in one of his letters, he told me that. But he says, I'm leaning towards the Republicans, but kind of an independent right now. So, and then in 1960, my dad was very dear friends with Jack and Bobby Kennedy. And Bobby and Jack both stayed at our home before he was president. And he used to talk to Jackie about Kennedy, that he wanted to support him. And Jackie didn't want to do that. And my dad was at a National Committee meeting in Washington, and Jackie Robinson happened to be there for another function. And my dad brought Jackie up to Jack Kennedy's suite to talk to him, and he just thought, I don't know if a rich kid from Massachusetts has any idea of the plight of the African Americans. So all through the campaign, he supported Nixon. But then he got frustrated with Nixon. And he actually got frustrated.
Can I just add one thing, Ronnie? Can I
Sure, go ahead.
one thing? Someone told me that at that meeting, when your dad brought Jackie Robinson up to meet JFK,
Yeah.
the major thing that upset Jackie and didn't sit well with him at all is that he claimed that JFK did not look him in the eyes.
That's what he claimed. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
He claimed.
That's what he
that
claimed.
was very
yeah.
interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry to butt in. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's good. I'm glad you said that. But then Martin Luther King was arrested and put in jail, and he reached out to Nixon to do something about it, and Nixon refused to do anything, and that really pissed him off. And he ended up that Bobby Kennedy called and Jack Kennedy called, and they got him released from prison. And there was I've seen the clip where Martin Luther King thanked the Kennedys for helping him, but at that point, Jackie was still stuck he was stuck. So his daughter Sharon used to tell me that she was for Jack Kennedy and the whole family was, but not Jackie. He would stick to his guns. But later on, after the election, when Kennedy became president, he did tell me that he made a big mistake, and he did support Bobby in 1968. So, but yeah, it was interesting. But I can understand because he was always wanting whoever could help the African Americans.
Sure. Well, you can understand that.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
And they were all bigots, those leaders.
I'm sorry?
Even Johnson was a bigot at those days. And he's the one
back in the day,
signed the Civil Rights Commission. He signed civil rights legislation.
I don't know how people, I don't know, Fred, maybe you want to cash in on this a little bit. I'm not sure how politicians change their stripes, whether it's out of for votes or their heart really changes them. What do you think about that, Fred?
I would say 90% of the time it's for the votes. 9% of the time it's because somebody's paying them off, and 1% of the time it's because it's from the heart. I am not inclined to believe too many politicians. As I indicated, I guess the last time we did this podcast, or I did this podcast, in '68 as a young kid, or a very young kid, I worked in Gene McCarthy's headquarters because my mom was a lifelong, way to the left of the Democrats, but she was for JFK and she was for McCarthy in '68. So I would go to his headquarters on Fairfax Boulevard and talk to Henry Waxman and Howard Berman, who ended up for like 40 years representatives in Congress. Anyways, I learned a lot, and then in '76 I was McCarthy's driver through Southern California when he ran again, and nobody knows that. He ran because he hated Jimmy Carter, didn't want Carter to get the nomination, and so I drove him to Dodger Stadium one night where he was good friends with Walter Alston because the Dodger farm team, of course, was in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Gene McCarthy was a big baseball guy, so he knew Walter. So I asked Jim Gilliam, where's Walter Alston? And Jim said, Skip's over there. And for the next half hour or so, Gene talked to Walter Alston about it. Anything they were talking about, I don't know. But it was a big kick. And just driving Gene around, he, to me, was the brightest politician I've ever met. And in a lot of ways, similar to Bernie Sanders in 2016, in that he took a stand that wasn't popular against the war. And then, of course, after he ran well in New Hampshire in '68, getting 43%, had forced Lyndon Johnson to say, I'm not going to run for re-election. And then, of course, Kennedy jumped in. So we'd go to the Kennedy rallies and boo him and support Gene. But at the convention, of course, Kennedy had already been assassinated, and then it was Humphrey against Gene. And Mayor Daley, of course, made sure that Humphrey won, and the rest is history. Nixon got elected twice and then got impeached, and almost got impeached. He resigned, and that was the end of that.
Right. It must have been very interesting.
I really want to talk about. Oh, I'm sorry, Ronnie. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It must have been very interesting driving around with Gene McCarthy.
I learned a lot. And again,
I'm
I don't
sure.
remember if I mentioned this or not, but he was talking to a representative in the back seat one of the times as I was driving, and I heard him say something like, no, we have to allow 6% or 3%, some crazy number. And then after the representative left, I said, he always asked me to call him Gene. I said, Gene, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. You're saying that we have to allow, and I forgot the number, but let's say 6% of rat hairs in our food? And he said, yeah, there's no way to totally eliminate them. So, folks, as you're listening to this show and you're eating dinner, remember that I think still in our laws we allow either 3 or 6% rat hairs in our food. Just remember that.
Yum. Yum, yum.
I lost my appetite.
Yum, yum.
My dad was dear friends with Gene McCarthy, too. They were dear friends. He respected him, too, although he was a Kennedy man. And he was also good friends with Hubert Humphrey.
Well, I mean,
Your father got around, Ronnie.
Yeah,
Your father
he did.
really got around.
He did. He was quite a guy.
He certainly did. There's so much to talk about in so little time about the 2018 iteration of the Dodgers and how they're doing right now. And I know I'm anxious to ask Fred a bunch of questions about what he feels and stuff. And I don't want to turn this Tale of Two Cities, Brooklyn to Los Angeles, into a political show, although
Right.
I do have a question that bothers me greatly, and I've asked it to Ralph Tycho a couple of times, a couple of people in my family that were Bernie supporters and had a hatred for Hillary. And if you just said that you used to go to Bobby Kennedy's speeches and boo him. Here's my question. If you're to the left and you're a progressive and very far left, and there's going to be, and there's going to be two guys or two people running for an office, and one of them is to the right of I can't even think of anybody, but somebody like totally awful to the right. Total. I mean, really.
But it wasn't like that, because McCarthy didn't drop out. McCarthy was still running against Kennedy in the primary, right. And in California, June 4th is when Kennedy won, and then of course he got assassinated. So it wasn't like Kennedy was running against Nixon at that point. Kennedy was running against McCarthy, and Humphrey hadn't said anything either at that point.
Okay.
So
right.
McCarthy against Kennedy, and there was no option as far as I'm concerned. And I think I indicated this in the late 50s. My mom, again, a lifelong, very progressive person, and her mother even more progressive probably, by way of Russia. My mom would have blacklisted writers over the house, not actors, but writers. Mm-hmm. Bobby Kennedy was part of that. Bobby Kennedy, Wecome, Joe McCarthy, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan. These people got people blacklisted. Some of them committed suicide. John Garfield, my mom's favorite actor of all time, committed suicide at 39 because of people like Bobby Kennedy and Roy Cohn and Joe McCarthy and Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. I can't forget that, nor would I ever forgive that. So there was no chance, even at a young age, of Fred ever supporting a Bobby Kennedy. I mean, against Nixon, no. I mean, it'd be the same. That's why I would support Bernie against the two people that ran in 2016. I knew Bernie wasn't going to win, but I owed it to him because of things that Hillary has done in the past that to me, unforgivable. And of course, I would never vote for Trump, so that wasn't even in the that wasn't even in the basket of possibility. But
so if Bobby would have won the nomination,
wrecked people's lives, and just because maybe afterwards he maybe changed. You asked that question before. Do people change? Maybe he changed politically, to help his brother out. But he did wreck people's lives. That's not something that's forgivable.
No.
I asked my original question very poorly because I didn't jump to the end game and that was if a party nominates Hillary and a party nominates Trump, how could you vote for Jill Stein or someone else knowing that you're putting it in jeopardy that Trump is going to win? And I really do believe that Trump, one of the reasons Trump won, besides Comey 6 days before the election, coming out with that reopening of the email thing, that was the stake through the heart. But how could a person who's liberal and left-wing and progressive allow himself or herself to, yes, I'm going to say the word, waste a vote in a general election on some clown like Ralph Nader and run the risk of a Nixon being elected or a Trump being elected? How can you do that?
Because
I could never even fathom that.
Because of the following. I knew the Clintons from Arkansas. I had read about Hillary before she got married. You know that her mom, they were living in a small Illinois town. Her mom was considered the biggest anti-Semite in that town. She was infamous anti-Semite. I had a good friend who worked as a lawyer who worked in the Clinton administration, and this is what he told me, and this is why it's almost funny. The day, here's a story. Almost every time something would go wrong, and if she was in the office, she'd come out screaming those damn Jews and not use the word Jews. She'd use other words, okay? So now we're in 2000, and she decides to run for senator, and my friend had never told me that story. And now it's the year 2000, and she announces that she's running for senator from New York, and my friend called me up and just laughed into the phone. I said, Harmon, why are you laughing? And he said, you don't know? And I said, what? He says, Hillary's running for senator from New York. And I said, okay. And he said, you know how much he hates Jews? And I didn't, but he told me the story. So from that and again, it's not because I was born Jewish, because I'm the least religious human being on earth. That's not the point. So A, she's anti-Semitic, but B, they were called, the Clintons were called Blue Dog Democrats. The Clintons fought for this anti-welfare bill, which basically threw a lot of people on the bottom level off of any kind of food stamps or any kind of help whatsoever. And so they sold out. They sold out as Blue Dog Democrats. That's how he got elected. And he was that way his entire, Bill and Hillary were that way their entire 8 years. So there were a lot of negatives about Hillary. And there was no chance of ever voting for Trump, because my great uncle knew him in New York and told me when I was 12 or 13 that this family is the lowest family on earth, and I would agree with him to this very day. But there was no way I could ever vote for Hillary. So, and then Bernie, again, if Bernie would have had the same money from the Democratic Party, he only lost by 3 percentage points to her if you added up all the primaries and things like that. You don't think if he had equal money he would have defeated Hillary? So, no, I'm not going to vote for a cheater. I'm not going to vote for an anti-Semite. And as far as the anti-welfare bill, basically the lowest level in this economy would be African Americans at that point. That would put her in that class as anti-African American too. So why would I ever vote for Hillary Clinton?
So if you have the power, which this is ridiculous, but I'm going to say it, if you had the power right now to replace Trump with Hillary, you wouldn't do it?
No, I honestly, I hate Trump more than a human being can ever hate anybody, okay? But I could not stand her either. So there's sometimes you just have to take a stand. And my stand is I can't stand either of them. And I never could stand either of them. I mean, there's nothing she could do to get me to stand, to be on her side. And as nutso as Trump is, and again, if you're going to say if it's 55-45, yeah. I mean, she's smarter than he is, of course. So from that aspect, you would have a smarter president. But she's no less a scumbag than he is, and I'll believe that to the day I die.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of the
things that Trump has reversed from Obama, you think Hillary would have reversed them?
No. Not awful.
No.
Well, there you go. The country would be better off.
I said 55-45. Okay, maybe 60.
Oh, all right.
But it really wouldn't matter to me if it was 90-10. I could not vote for somebody who I know is a faker, who I know sold people out. I mean, again, I was in politics my whole life, but certainly in the 90s I've been into politics. That anti-welfare bill hurt people badly. I mean, it'd be like Trump now taking away health care. There's no difference. I mean, you don't have any food, or you don't have money to go to get yourself fixed at the hospital. There's no difference between the two. They did that because it meant more votes for them, because whites in this country historically want to be able to put down blacks and other minorities, and that anti-welfare bill was as anti-black as Trump's comments about the Muslims or the Mexicans or anything. I mean, it was as racist as what Trump said during his entire campaign, and I followed that pretty closely in the 90s, and I couldn't stand that bill, and it passed. And then Bill makes a big to-do about it and does a national speech like how great it was. You have to go to work and this and that nonsense. I mean, it's no different than Jeff Sessions now going in that same direction. So there are people that aren't running, that aren't lucky, as you or me or somebody else. It's not like they don't want to work. A lot of people try. A lot of people can't get jobs. Doesn't mean they don't want to work. I think the preponderance of people do want to work. So to say that if you don't work, you can't eat and your kids can die or get sick, no, I can't ever go for that.
No. Interesting. Very interesting.
On that note, let me just say, this kills me to say this. Trump will be reelected. This country is so fucked up. He definitely will be reelected. Definitely. Okay, let's talk some Dodgers. 2018.
I hope you're wrong about that, Peter. I hope you're wrong.
No one hopes I'm wrong about that more than I do. No one on this earth. But it's sad, but it's going to happen. This country is so fucked up. All right, let's go out to L.A. and Dodger Stadium. What's the story with the Dodgers? They played like garbage for April, most of May. What happened, Fred? What happened? How did they turn it around?
Well, again, 4 of their 5 starting pitchers from spring training aren't in the rotation, and the 5th isn't getting anybody out in Alex Wood. So they've been fortunate in that Stripling has pitched well, and they're also fortunate in that I think they've hit 29 home runs in the first 10 or 12 days of June, and that's not going to continue, even though it's fun to watch. But Max Muncy's not going to do that, and Peterson has turned it on. And look, I play fantasy sports, fantasy baseball, and I'm using Dodgers because they're hitting home runs. But can that continue? Yeah, I mean they'll hit some home runs. They lead the majors in home runs right now, but in the long run, they've got to get Kershaw back, and who knows if Hill comes back with the blisters. And Maeda is going Wednesday night this evening as we do this show, so who knows if he's going to be able to throw. So he's got all kinds of problems. So, I mean, again, I think they'll win that division. They're not going to win as many games as they won last year, but they're going to win their 92 games or 90 games and win that division. But without the pitching, without Kershaw, they're not going to. I mean, it would take a miracle to win the playoffs because pitching usually wins in the playoffs. So they're fun to watch because you don't know which guy's going to hit a home run on a particular night.
Yeah.
But and tonight again they're going against the lefty, so you got to play Puig because he's a righty, and maybe you play Taylor at shortstop if you're playing fantasy. Maybe he'll go deep once or twice. But it's fun to watch. But again, but a big story that nobody's talking about, if it comes through, if AT&T is allowed to buy Time Warner.
Time Warner, yeah.
I wonder what that means as far as the blackout here in Southern California, considering that AT&T owns DirecTV, and Time Warner, of course, is the only facility in Southern California, all the way to Nevada, where you can get the Dodger games. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens as far as that is concerned, as far as the fans are concerned. Because I'm telling you the truth. Right now, the way they're playing, guys, it would be a lot of fun to be talking about them. But because every game is blacked out, nobody's saying it. Well, 60%
That's
of people.
terrible.
Just,
That is so terrible.
Games.
I can't stand the thought of it even. It's just
All
terrible.
right, Fred. What do they do at the trading deadline, if anything?
Really, I can't see them making any major moves, to tell you the truth. I mean, Kershaw's got the option after this year to opt out, but I don't think they're trading Kershaw. So other than that, I mean, no. I mean, I think they've been totally shocked. Like everybody else, when Matt Kemp first came up with the Dodgers, I was a big Matt Kemp guy, right? But I thought
Me too.
Already in baseball, thought he was done. Last time I checked, I think he's leading the league in hitting. If not now, he's second. I mean, and as far as OPS, I think he's 1 or 2 too. So, I mean, they've had a lot of fortunate things happen. And he lost 20 or 30 pounds. He's made all the difference, and he's hitting with some power. And Puig, you can never tell, but he's certainly playing well now. And they also have guys who can play a lot of positions, and
which is great. Yeah.
Center field. Hernandez can play shortstop or center field. Peterson can't play center field, so he can play left, but if you need him in center, he can play center. So, I mean, they got a lot of guys, and Muncy can play first base or second base, so you got a lot of guys who can play a lot of positions, which doesn't hurt because they've had all these injuries.
Where did Muncy come from?
Minors. And nobody thought he wasn't like the highest rated, he wasn't even close to the highest rated guy in the Dodger farm system, but all I know is every night he hits a home run.
Was he in major leagues before?
No, I don't think so.
Before the Dodgers? Huh?
Oh,
No, I think he played in the A's system. Something tells
But
me.
in the minor
my memory is,
yeah.
something in my head is telling me he came from Oakland.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
He could be a rookie of the year. He could be another rookie of the year.
I don't know.
I don't know.
He certainly is. He certainly is tearing up the league lately.
He sure is. My God. Unbelievable.
I don't know about not making any moves at the trade deadline. I'm looking for Friedman to do something. I know he's not going to mortgage anybody. He's not going to go over the 197 million cap
budget. Yeah.
I know he's not going to do that.
But
again, I would be surprised if they didn't do a thing. I'm not saying they have to. I'm just predicting what Friedman will do, and I think he'll do something.
But the problem is Andrew Friedman is very, very careful about giving up any people in that farm system.
Right.
2 years ago, or last year, they gave up, I think, their 4th or their 7th best prospect. Again, who knows what these numbers really mean, for Darvish. And what he last half the season, and then he leaves. So they basically rented him and gave up 2 guys in the farm system. The Dodgers are adverse to doing that. So I don't know if there's a lot that they'd be willing to give up. And I don't know, okay, tell me where, you'd fill in, because it depends on if the pitchers that they have now are healthy or not. If they're healthy, you're not going to need a pitcher. If they're not healthy, you are. And one day you might have a blister, and the next day you might not. So I don't know if you really gamble in a heavy in a heavy fashion and give up too much in that farm system. If you don't give up too much in that farm system, what are you going to get in return?
That's true. That's true.
That's
I don't know.
that's
They
all,
do need
right?
pitching. A
guy that I would like to see them try and get is Kelvin Herrera from the Kansas City Royals. He's a relief pitcher. His whip is under 1.
Okay, if you get him, would Jansen be happy with splitting the 9th inning? You know that's not the case. So wouldn't that be
true.
Wouldn't that be causing internal problems in the dugout,
right,
in the clubhouse?
It's one of those things. It's one of those things where, somebody's ego is going to have to take a shot, and they're both closers, and they're, this move with Kelvin Herrera would have made more sense perhaps a month ago, and before that, when Jansen was having problems. Now he seems to have righted the ship, but
What about starting pitching, Peter?
Starting pitchers, I don't know. The guy who's pitching against them tonight was whispered about.
Cole Hamels?
Cole Hamels. They talked about him.
Well,
they might be able to pry him away because Texas isn't going anywhere, and he makes a lot of money.
Okay, but I don't know how many more years on his contract, but let's say he's got a year or two left on his contract. What would you give up in that farm system, knowing Andrew Friedman does not give up a lot in that farm system? And so, Texas really doesn't have to bend here, doesn't have to bow.
No, they don't.
They could wait.
They do not. Unless Texas is looking to dump his salary. Then they would take less than they normally would.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how rich the Texas Rangers are or how hurting they are economically. But if they're looking to dump, or anybody else for that matter, not just Texas, could be anybody looking to dump salary.
But wouldn't there be other teams that would also want to Cole Hamels that might give more from their farm system than Andrew Friedman?
Well, of course. Well, that goes without saying. But you're looking at not 30 teams. You're looking at maybe 5 or 6 people that are in the hunt for the big prize. I mean, you're not going to see the Pittsburgh Pirates go after Cole Hamels. You're not going to see the New York Mets go after Cole Hamels, et cetera. But the teams that are in it and have the money and have the space underneath the $197 million cap, if they can maneuver and not give too much up, and Texas is looking, or other clubs are looking to dump salary of a really top-line pitcher. It was even said last month that they should take a look at Bartolo Colon. I laughed when I saw that.
Yeah.
I never thought they should have done that. But, they're not as deep in pitching. When spring training comes, even before spring training, and you're reading that the Dodgers have 11 starters under contract, and you laugh and you go, what the hell are they going to do with 11 starters? And then people say you can never have too much depth, and you never, blah, blah, blah. Well, now with all these godforsaken injuries, they seem to get an injury a night. I mean, even a kid got hurt, Bueller. Those 11 starters, that doesn't mean squat now. I mean, you got to go looking for somebody. I mean, imagine if they lose out of the playoffs, or they just barely get in on the one game thing and lose that one game. What people are going to say about Friedman and ownership?
Well, I mean, again, they gave up 2 top farm guys, and Darvish is with the Cubs now. And so what did they gain by that? So you got to be very careful if you're giving up the future. And
I'm sure they'll be very careful, but I'm also sure that they will investigate the whole scenario.
But the problem is you're paying 36-year-old Hill a lot of money, and you knew going in that he was blister prone, and so you never know when that.
Yeah.
What happens if he's back before July 31 and he's pitching well? Okay,
right.
Now you got 2 more months of the season. What do you do? I mean, do you gamble that he's not going to get a blister, or do you say, okay, he's now the second guy in the rotation if Kershaw's back? So I don't. I mean, it's a very tough situation. I mean, for Andrew Friedman, no matter who's the general manager, no matter who's the president of the organization, this is injuries that some guys are prone to blisters, and you know that going in. So what's the answer? Tell me. I don't. Would you? Let me ask you guys. Would you gamble if he's thrown 3 straight good games? Let's say the end of June, or the end of July, and now it comes to July 31. Do you think he's going to be able to go the last 2 months? You tell me.
I would err on the side of caution. I'd get somebody else. A good friend of the show. I'm sure you're both aware of Howard Cole, who writes for Forbes magazine. He had what I thought was an excellent article 48 hours ago on how the Dodgers, the players, the guys in the uniforms, the guys down in the clubhouse have stepped it up. And now it's time for Andrew Friedman to step up and help out. And
I read that article.
Proponent. Cole is a proponent for going after Cole Hamels. Howard Cole is a proponent for going after him. I just thought I'd mention him because I couldn't think of anybody else right off the top of my head. Now, in saying that they gave up two good young guys to get Yu Darvish, those are the breaks of the game. I mean, stuff like that happens all the time in baseball, and it's happened for over 100 years. People give up things that they figure, this guy's no good. I just give him up. And so, Brolio for Brock, and stuff like that. Delino DeShields for Pedro Martinez. I mean, the list is long. But doing nothing, you're gambling with your job security, I think, if you're Andrew Friedman. You got to do something. You got to figure something out.
Well, but he is really big on protecting the farm system, so.
Yeah, he is.
Very tough choice for him.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Did he trade anybody that's on the current roster? Do you think?
No. And,
No?
it's interesting, too, because I predicted going into the season that Andrew Toles would be the starting left fielder.
Mm-hmm.
He's on the DL. He's as talented as you're going to find, and he's not even playing. So, no, I would not get rid of anything that they have because, again, I mean, they're playing without Seager. They're playing without Toles. Turner plays, 20 games and he's out again. Now he's playing again. So, I mean, it's right now they got a lot of guys who can play a lot of positions. I think it all depends on the pitching staff. So your point about Hamels might be the best point if they're willing to give up something in the farm system. Because obviously, he's not a number one starter, but he's certainly a number 2 or 3, and he's going to give you 6 innings most of the time. So based on that, that's where they're lacking, with all the injuries. So, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying Friedman is just opposed usually to giving up too much in the farm system.
Right.
What do you think Kershaw's going to do?
I don't know.
At the end of the season, I mean.
Yeah, I know. To me, he's a hero. No matter what happens, because I don't know if you guys know the story, but his wife and Clayton spend a lot of the off season in Africa.
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Sick and giving money away and things like that. How many players do that? So I think it's a great thing to play your entire career in one organization. I really do. I mean, there are so few nowadays that do that. So, I mean, I hope I hope he wants to stay here, but sometimes you question if he's happy. I don't know.
Right.
It's hard to read his mind, but I would hope as a fan, and not just a baseball fan, but a fan of a nice human being, the Dodgers, he's a great guy, and his family, they deserve the best, and, but he's from Texas. So, there's always 2 teams there. So, what do you do?
I'm sure the Dodgers would re-sign him, but I'm wondering if Kershaw wants to be re-signed. That's
because he's made some comments, that he's not sure of anything and this and that, and a lot of people like to go home. I mean, it's almost like the Paul George thing in basketball. He's from Southern California. He had a good year with Oklahoma City, but he's from Southern Cal, from Palmdale. So, does he come home? I mean, coming home, Hamels would probably jump, obviously, to come home and come on a team that could win the World Series, or play in Texas and play on a team that's going to be at the end of the season, 10 or 16 games under 500.
Yeah. I think what's going to feature Clayton Kershaw's decision is going to be if his back injury is much worse than anyone realizes, and that is it chronic? Does he need surgery? Is he going to be the same pitcher when and if he ever recovers from whatever it is? I mean, let's face it, fellas, the guy is 30 years old. He hurt his back last year and maybe even the year before. This is not his first or second back injury. And a back is just as bad as a hitter's wrist. Talking about Turner now. I personally don't think Kershaw nor Justin Turner are going to be what they used to be. They're on the wrong side of 30, and they injured themselves in places that it's not a pulled muscle, it's not a hamstring, it's something much heavier than that for both of them. I think they're both in jeopardy of never forget about staying in LA or not, but I think they're both of those guys are in jeopardy of never really getting back to the level that they once were at, and that's life. I mean, I'll be accused by Linda Wilson and others of being the naysayer and the negative and the Debbie Downer, but I've been watching baseball all my life. I'm 71 years old. I've seen this happen over and over and over and over and over and over to the greatest of players. And it just happens. I mean, I was never a Yankee fan, never will be a Yankee fan. But Don Mattingly, it cost him not only his career, it cost him the Hall of Fame, it cost him everything, his back injury. Back injuries are really, really bad. Chronic back injuries are bad. And I would have to put Clayton Kershaw's back injury in the classification of chronic. I also said that when Justin Turner broke his wrist and he was going to be out for the 8 weeks, I told Bernie Rose and Ronnie Rabinowitz and Linda Wilson, I said, he might not be the hitter he was ever again. I mean, you need that wrist in hitting a 100-mile-an-hour baseball, 100-mile-an-hour pitch. But anyway, be that as it may, I think we've reached the end of the line. I am really happy that we touched on Brooklyn, we touched on politics, we touched on Los Angeles. We did a good job tonight, all three of us, and I want to thank Ronnie Rabinowitz, as always, and Fred Wallin. Definitely, you're welcome back again and again and again and again and again. And we'll do this again next week. I thank you, both of you. Thank you very much. And you guys enjoy your evening, okay? Thanks.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Peter. Okay.
Good night.
Very, very much.